As the world starts to open up once more, I promised myself that I would move on from the pandemic era, but I think there's one more topic that I must touch on specifically in one video before completely moving on. There was one major match set to happen in All Elite Wrestling before the pandemic hit in March 2020, a match that we only just missed out on by 2 weeks due to the world shutting down. And this is a match that without a doubt would have had heavy storyline implications for the future of All Elite Wrestling. And the match that I'm talking about is the original Blood and Guts match that was set for March 25th, 2020 between the Elite and the Inner Circle. There's no doubt in my mind that this would have been the biggest match in AEW history. At the very least, up to that point, it was the most star-studded match that AEW was about to have, and it would have been coming right off the heels of AEW's excellent pay-per-view Revolution 2020. But in my opinion, the most intriguing thing about this match going into it was the story, in particular the one going on between Hangman and everybody else in the Elite. The story was just getting white hot, and when it turned out that we couldn't get the match, AEW had to think on the fly. But the one question I'm left asking myself is this: is what we got close to what was originally planned? This is Tranquilo Club, and this is the match that never was in AEW. As previously mentioned, the original Blood and Guts event was set to take place on March 25th, 2020 at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Had this show taken place, it would have most likely been the most attended show in AEW history, surpassing the record set by the debut episode of Dynamite, which had over 14,000 people in attendance. In other words, this show would have been massive. AEW knew exactly what they were doing when they booked their first show in the New York metropolitan area. Sure, it wasn't in New York City proper, but it was still in a large arena that was close enough to New York City. But just to put it in perspective, AEW sold the majority of the tickets for this show before a single match was even announced. That's right, nobody knew what the card was. But that's just how much momentum AEW had at the time. People wanted to see AEW for the first time ever, especially in the New York area. All those factors already had ensured that this would be a special show, so you can imagine that when it was announced that Blood and Guts, AEW's take on War Games, would be taking place in this arena, hype went through the roof. This became a can't miss event, with even a few people within the industry going as far as predicting that this would be the biggest TV rating AEW would pull, even beating the debut episode of Dynamite. And well, I don't think that's too bold of a claim considering who would be in the match. This was a star-studded match, as I said before. It would be the two biggest groups in AEW facing off in a match that had actually been building up since the very first episode of Dynamite. The Inner Circle versus the Elite. This was basically all the biggest stars in AEW at that time in one single match. But as I said in the intro, the most intriguing thing about this match was the timing of it storyline wise, and in particular between all the members of the Elite. Leading up to this match, we were right off the heels of the masterpiece of a tag team match between the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Hangman Page at Revolution. And yes, this was when Hangman Page was at war with himself and all the other members of the Elite. If you want a full detailed breakdown of the Revolution tag team match and all the months of storytelling that led up to it, then you're in luck because I have a separate video that covered that entire arc that I'll link in the description below. So after that tag team match, things were very uncertain between the members of the Elite, even though Hangman Page and Kenny Omega walked off together after that match was over. Hangman Page refused to shake hands with the Young Bucks while Kenny Omega embraced them. So once again, Kenny Omega found himself in the middle of all the drama just as he was in the lead up to that match. Then you had Cody Rhodes, who had just gotten done feuding with MJF, and at that point was kind of already doing his own thing separate from the Elite, but not to the extent that he is now. At this point, Cody was still very much a part of the Elite, as when he took the 10 lashes from MJF, the Young Bucks came out to support him. So despite not being on TV together all the time as they might have been once before AEW was a thing, the Elite was very much still a family, but they were a dysfunctional one at this point. And I mean, in storyline, it kind of made sense. These guys went from being top acts across multiple companies to now having to run their own major wrestling promotion. Back then, all they had to worry about was the Elite, but now they had to worry about an entire roster. Or in Hangman's case, he just wanted his friends back that were always there to support him, not these EVPs who are always busy. In short, going from being a top act in a promotion to now having to run your own promotion was such a radical change for all the members of the Elite. And this is when the Blood and Guts match comes in. Since the very first episode of Dynamite, the Elites were being terrorized left and right by the Inner Circle. And while members from both factions would face off against each other individually here and there, we never got that big Elite versus Inner Circle match. But it was finally set to take place after Revolution 2020, after everybody got their individual feuds wrapped up. But as I said, half of the Elite were feuding with each other, which made this match intriguing. Meanwhile, the Inner Circle were living life. Even though Jericho had just lost the AEW World title, they were still together like a family. The Inner Circle seemed inseparable, while the Elites were all at odds with each other. But after Blood and Guts was announced, members of the Elites were willing to put their differences aside to work together and take out the Inner Circle. All the members except one, Hangman Adam Page. Hangman still wanted nothing to do with the Young Bucks. And could you blame him really after everything they put him through in the lead up to Revolution? Then there's Omega, who's stuck between the Hangman and Bucks drama, and then Cody, who hasn't been seen with the Elite in months, who's now just coming back into the picture. For longtime fans of the Elite from pre-AEW days, this was not the Elite we knew. This was not the Elite we fell in love with. This was a broken Elite. If you follow these guys for all those years leading up to All In, leading up to Double or Nothing, leading up to All Out, leading up to the first episode of Dynamite, this was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see the Elite, who are the reason why AEW was even possible, fall apart before their biggest match as a group together against the Inner Circle. But this was the Elite's chance to prove that they could still be the leading faction in professional wrestling. I mean, these are the same guys who put on the largest independent wrestling show in American history. You would think there's an unbreakable bond there. The Elite won a lot together, but the question was, were they willing to lose together too if the occasion called for it? That was the question. And when the pandemic would hit, we got the first AEW Dynamite episode behind closed doors at Daly's place. And it was here where things became really uncertain, both in storyline and in real life. During the show's cold open on the first pandemic episode of Dynamite, Hangman appeared to agree to put all differences aside to work together as a team. But later in the night, the Elite would lose a 6-man tag against the Inner Circle to lose the advantage for Blood and Guts, which was supposed to happen the week after. But as we know now, that would not end up happening, as Blood and Guts would have to be postponed indefinitely. And as a result, this storyline came to a screeching halt, as AEW had to figure out what they were gonna do for the foreseeable future. The story of a broken Elite, an Elite at odds with each other, fighting an Inner Circle who's very much a family in front of over 10,000 fans in a Blood and Guts match was just not meant to be. And it's this very match, this very story that I think about when I think about what AEW could have done had the pandemic not hit. My gut tells me to this day that something big was going to happen in those two rings. The Elite was not fine, but were they going to be able to overcome that to beat the Inner Circle to a loud ovation? Or were they going to implode in front of all their fans? Regardless, it would have made for an emotional moment no matter what the outcome would have been. But what most intrigues me about this match is, would everybody still have been on the same path that they're on now had it happened? Would Hangman still have been the guy who got taken advantage of by FTR, which caused him to lose his tag team title, and most importantly, the only man he thought was his friend in Kenny Omega? Would Omega and the Bucks still become megalomaniacs at the top of AEW? And something that really intrigues me, would Cody still have stepped away from the Elite had Blood and Guts happened? And if so, would the reason have happened in the Blood and Guts match? I have so many questions about this match and what the plans would have been had it happened. What I do know for certain is what we would have gotten in Blood and Guts would have been a different tone compared to what we got in Stadium Stampede. And don't get me wrong, I liked the Stadium Stampede and it was very much needed for the time it happened in. But I do wish we would have seen the more intense and emotional Blood and Guts climax for this feud. And who knows, maybe everybody's on the path they were supposed to be on anyway had the Blood and Guts match happened. Whether that's the case or not, I still give massive props to AEW because they were able to adapt pretty well in my opinion. And the story between the Elite is very much still going on to this very day. and it's about to enter high gear with Hangman Page and Kenny Omega finally coming face to face for the AEW World title. But for all we know, everything we know about the Elite right now could have been set up in the Blood and Guts match. More than anything though, it's unfortunate that we'll never see the story of a broken Elite facing their biggest threat in the inner circle have its proper conclusion that was originally planned. I have no doubt in my mind that one day down the road, AEW will reunite the Elite and it'll be one of the biggest things they've ever done. But the time will have to be right, and it'll have to be for the right reason. It'll have to be for a threat that's running rampant on the whole company. But for now, the story of Hangman Page, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, the Elite, is one of a group that wanted to change the world. And they did it, but it came at a cost. And the cost was everything.